Hi everyone. In this section, I'm going to discuss how to write comments to the authors and the editors. Let's begin with this interesting cartoon. When reviewing, try to remember that you are an author too and be professional and constructive in your approach. That can be hard, but don't let your inner nitpicker get the upper hand. Leave 24 hours between reading the manuscript and writing your review so as to allow time for your reasonable self to rise to the fore. Now let's discuss in detail how your comments to the authors should look like. Remember, your first and foremost goal is to help the authors in improving the quality of their paper. Try to give a positive and constructive feedback to the authors as much as possible. For example, you might be wanting to tell the authors that the manuscript is fatally flawed. But try to phrase it in a better way by saying the study appears to be missing a key point, or additional work is required to support the conclusions. Try to provide very specific and concise comments to the authors. Your comments should be easily understandable. Always begin your report by summarizing strengths of the study. This will bring an overall positive outlook towards your report. Refer to the page and line numbers while writing comments so that the author knows what you are exactly referring to. Another tip to prepare a good review report is to split your report into two sections. Start with noting down major comments, which should include essential and fundamental points which the authors must address to proceed with the publication. Then add a section of minor comments, which can include points which are still important but will not affect the overall conclusion of the study. These are suggestions for the authors and are not essential. Make sure that you comment on all important sections of the paper, like the presentation of data, results, and discussion. As a reviewer, you are not required to disclose the recommendation on this particular paper to the authors. Remember, there would be 2 to 3 more reviewers for this paper, and the editor would make a final recommendation based on all the reports. Ensure that the comments you have written for the authors are matching with the recommendation on decision you are giving to the editor. Coming next to another important point to be kept in mind while writing comments. Make sure that the language is clear. It has a neutral tone and is not personal towards the authors. Quoting another interesting example here, you might be wanting to tell the authors that the technical details don't make any sense. But, as suggested, try to use a neutral tone and say the technical details should be expanded and clarified to ensure that the readers understand exactly what the researchers studied. Now, moving on to the next topic, writing comments to the editor. Remember that confidential comments will not be disclosed to the authors. Comment on the novelty and significance. Do not include detailed concerns about the manuscript, which the authors need to be aware of. Just give the editors an overall picture about the manuscript and help the editors to make their decision. You could point out any issues relating to conflicts of interest here, concerns over suspected author misconduct. Recommend whether the manuscript is suitable for publication or not. Now, how to make a recommendation on the paper? This can often be the most difficult part of the process when you are new to reviewing. Remember, it's just a recommendation and the editor will make the final decision as long as the editor is given enough arguments to come to an appropriate decision. You might want to recommend that the manuscript can be accepted without any changes. This could be in cases where you spot no errors in the manuscript. It's fitting the scope of the journal and everything looks perfect. Though in reality, there are very few papers which get this kind of a recommendation. Then, depending on the corrections required in the paper, you might want to say that the paper can be accepted with minor revisions or major revisions. Major revisions usually in cases where there is some problem with the methodology, there is some scope of improvement, and minor revision in cases where you spot some minor errors, you have some suggestions to make the overall manuscript better, etc. You might want to recommend a rejection in cases where you see that the methodology is absolutely wrong, or the author might require a very long time to increase the sample size, or the authors might have to redo the study totally. I've listed a few do's and don'ts or bear in mind points. Do give a positive feedback first in your report. Do keep the focus on the research and not the authors. Be professional and respectful. Be aware of the possibility for bias in your review. Do check your report for clarity before submitting it. And do raise your suspicions in the comments to editors if you suspect plagiarism, fraud, or have other ethical concerns, providing as much detail as possible. Now, moving on to some don'ts. Don't use the review to promote your own research or hypothesis. Don't feel under pressure to detect fraud and misconduct. Don't make comments that could make your identity obvious to the authors. And don't ask the authors to cite your work or that of your colleagues unnecessarily. Thank you.